Hi, welcome to Livingston Education Live. I'm Andrew Miller. With me is Seth Cohen, one of the 4 candidates running for Livingston Board of Education, one of the 2 Livingston Board of Education positions this year. Before we get started, I want to let everyone know that all 4 Board of Education candidates were invited to participate in these one-on-one interviews. Seth, welcome. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation.
Thank you for having me.
And through this opportunity, we hope to get to know you and what you're looking to bring to the Board of Education. So
I appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate the opportunity to sit here with you tonight, that the opportunity that the other moderators are creating on the platform for not just for me and for all of us. And let's have a good conversation. And I really hope to have the opportunity to get to know not just folks in an online forum, but in a personal forum as well. So.
Absolutely. So why don't we start? Tell us a little bit about yourself, about how you came to Livingston, and a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so my wife and I got to Livingston quite honestly by accident. I work in pharmaceuticals, and my job relocated from Manhattan to Bridgewater, and we were looking for a place that was commutable for me down to Bridgewater and my wife back to Manhattan, because that's where she worked. And this was literally 2 weeks after we came back from our honeymoon, so it was our first major marital decision. And we ended up in Livingston. We found a townhouse in the Regency Club, which we lived in from 2005 until right before my son started kindergarten. And he's now at Mount Pleasant Middle. And so that's how we ended up in Livingston. And so a little bit about me: born and raised on Long Island, natural Long Island boy, huge New York Islanders fan. That's part of who I am, and when everyone who knows me sees me around town, I'm wearing an Islanders t-shirt. I like to call my wardrobe Islander chic. So that's just who I am. Beyond that, I think the things folks will find out about me, I'm a natural optimist. I see the world from a positive lens at all times. You're not going to hear me in this campaign talking about our school's challenges or our board's challenges. You're going to hear me talking about our opportunities, because that's just how I see the world. I've always seen the world that way. It's kind of what makes me me. Actually, I see the glass as full, half with water and half with air.
Okay.
And so that's also part of my personality, is to play a little bit of devil's advocate and to see things that other people might not naturally see. It's part of what I do professionally as a business insights and analytics lead for Novartis. It's my job to take information from all different sources, whether it be talking to people and getting those qualitative insights. I understand how people think and feel, as well as using data and analytics and big data sets to really hone in on how we drive decision making, looking at return on investment for our programs and all sorts of stuff. But the most important part about me is I'm a proud parent. I have a son who is in middle school, Mount Pleasant Middle. I have a 1-year-old who is now 18 months and has been the joy of all joys. And I think, as many people who know my story know, that 3.5 years ago, my daughter Maya passed away. Thank you. And even now, even every time I say it, it still gets me. You'll see, I'm a crier too. It's just kind of who I am. And it's why I started Maya's Rainbow Foundation in her honor, which has been my salvation through these past 3.5 years. I'm really proud of the work that we've done in building and partnering with JCC Metro West and creating an art education program, dedicating a refined space to the arts at their camp in Camp Deany-Reback. And just last week, we just completed the construction of a brand new outdoor art studio called the Maya's Rainbow Outdoor Art Studio. And so it's been not the way I wanted to be her dad, but it is the way I am her dad, and I'm really proud of what we've done. And so that's a little bit about me. I hope that's a fair and detailed enough answer.
That is. So now, 2 kids, been in town for a while. What's drove you to want to run for the Board of Ed this year?
So I have been thinking about this for more than just this year. I actually considered running last year, but I didn't find I was ready personally. My daughter, my 1-year-old, was very early, 6 months at the time, so I wasn't ready as a family. I didn't feel I was ready as a candidate either. I felt I needed more homework to be done, and I've spent the past year watching and listening as best as I can. Quite honestly, I watch a lot of your guys' feed of the board meetings, because that allows me to have balance in my life. which has been great to be able to attend a board meeting, but also be holding a baby with a bottle.
And now you even know where to sit.
Now, yes, if you saw my comment at the last board meeting, I now know not to sit in front of the camera so that my bald spot shows the entire time. But a little FaceTime is never a bad thing. So for me, this was the right year for a couple of reasons. One, as a natural optimist, I look at where we are as a district, and I think we're in a decent place. I mean, the hiring of Dr. Block has been a really solid hire. He's only been here for a little bit of time, but if you've gotten the chance to talk to him and get to know him a little bit, you can see this is a solid individual, and we are going to be in good hands, and hopefully in good hands for the long term. And so when you're looking at an election like this, you're looking at, well, where can we continue to grow? And that's why I'm running. As someone who sees the world from an opportunity perspective, I see opportunity for us in how we can engage the community, right? As someone who spends his career talking to people and listening and asking questions for a living, how we can get more people into the fold is a big thing for me. And it was, you see it even on your survey results from last year, the notion of engagement and transparency. You see that. It's something important to me. Beyond that, there's opportunity for just from an oversight perspective within the board, which is the board's job. The board is not here to run the schools. That is Mr. Block, Dr. Block's job, and everyone who works there. It's our job to oversight. Should I be on the board? And from an oversight perspective, I think there's good questions that need to be asked about how we're utilizing technology in our classrooms. I think there's good questions to be asked about how are we approaching mental health of our students. I think there's good questions to be asked around how are we, there's a ton of innovation and just this explosion of different things and techniques and classroom styles taking place, and you see the posts all over your site. I think it's one of the larger topics of conversation on Livingston Education. Right? I think there's good questions to be asked about how do we evaluate the right things for Livingston Public Schools and how we adopt those. And then, without a doubt, there are good questions to be asked about our budget and how we fund. With a 2% cap, with expiring contracts in 2020, I think there are good questions to be asked about how do we evaluate our programs, how do we evaluate our spend, and how do we look for opportunities to maximize the value of our taxpayer dollars. And so for me, the reason I'm running is because I believe there are really good questions to be answered, and that's what I do for a living. I ask questions. I use information and data to answer questions. And one of the things as I've studied and gotten prepared for this campaign is you read a lot about what makes an effective board member and what makes an effective board. And one of the keys is the use of data and information, because that's what needs to guide our decision making. And that is my skill. And so I'm running not because I think there are problems that I think I can solve. I'm running because I think I have the right skills to add value to the conversation. And that's why I'm running for Board of Education.
That's great. Thank you. So with that, that you just covered one of the next questions, is some of those key competencies that you feel you want to bring or help take the board to the next level. So that one of those big competencies then is that whole big data piece.
It is. It's a big thing for me. It is. I am Director of Business Insights and Analytics at Novartis Oncology. I spend my day utilizing information to ensure the decisions my company makes on the brands that we have are based in fact, are based in competent understanding of reality, are based in an understanding of how people feel, right? When you ask people questions, part of my job isn't to just represent all the analytics around, prescriptions and all that kind of stuff. It's also my job to represent, the term we utilize is to be the voice of the customer. And I think as an elected official, that is an enormous part of what you do, is be the voice of those you represent. And as a professional, I take it with great seriousness, and it's something that I feel from a skill set perspective, that's what I would bring to this board.
Great. And those are important. In terms of what anything else that you feel apart from the data, that you might be able to see, where you might want to see enhancements to the board as well from your candidacy?
So there are a couple areas that for me, that I'm focused on from a policy perspective.
Sure.
So one of which is our student records policy, which is, really the control of the information about our students. We are rolling out a ton of technology. We are rolling out, my son is logging on to more and more apps, and I am wondering where all this data is going. And I don't know that our policy from a student records perspective truly captures what we should be ensuring for our students. And so one of the questions that I want to bring to the board and ask, should I be a board member, is to examine our student records policy to ensure that it meets the needs of a 21st century school district. That it's not just about the grade books and things like that, but we're creating access to technology that can understand how our kids approach a math problem and how our kids learn through artificial intelligence and things like that. And I've spent the last 2 years working in artificial intelligence in my role, and so I know the amount of data that this can collect. Are we truly capturing, from a policy perspective, the protective rules that we need in place for our kids? And so that's a question, and as someone who spends his day working with these technologies, I see how much data they create, and it's something that I think we need to think about, and that's a skill set I bring to the conversation. The other one, if it's okay if I keep going, is on our curriculum policy, which is, for our curriculum policy, it's a really strong and well-written policy for the adoption of new curriculum into our schools. Where it lacks is, how do we test new ideas? How do we pilot programs? There are no evaluative criteria in that curriculum policy that allows us to address, here's a new idea. Well, how do we test to ensure it's something that we should roll out? In fact, I actually had this conversation with a board member over the weekend. This board member and I were getting together just to chat and get to know one another. And this was an idea I brought up, and their response was positive to that is something we should look at, because
So you're saying instead of just blanket rolling it out with no testing,
even if you look at one-to-one was piloted, okay? There were no standard criteria around a pilot. There were no KPIs that were truly put in place. It was really, can we put technology in the classrooms, and can we make it work? That was effectively a lot of the criteria. What I want to see us do is be a bit more structured with our KPIs, with our performance indicators on our new curriculum. We cannot address all of this evolution and revolution taking place in education and look for ways to adopt new things, all the things that you guys see all the time talked about on your forum, without a means by which to evaluate whether or not we should adopt them, or whether or not they're worthy of full-on adoption. There's plenty of things worthy of test, and we should be open to test, and we should create an environment that allows our educators to test, and allows those tests, quite frankly, to fail sometimes, because that's how you learn. But we can't roll things out blanket without having some degree of structure around that. And our curriculum policy, again, well written for the full-on adoption of things, but not for the testing of new ideas. And so I think that's one of the areas that I want to enhance should I be on the board, because that's important to me. Testing matters.
got it. Going back to technology for a second, so you mentioned one-on-one, you mentioned that you're interested in the technology. Where do you see it? I mean, the way I think about it, it's like technology plays various roles within our district, not just the systems like gradebook and the student records, but it's how students interact daily. I mean, we have high schoolers, middle schoolers who now have with computers.
I'm about to be the parent of one,
and I've got a high school senior. So my question to you is, where do you see the role of technology, not just in the, let's say, in the board in the administrative office, but where do you see it from an instructional standpoint, from a curriculum standpoint? I mean, obviously it has a role, but where do you see it on a day-to-day basis?
So
from a policy standpoint.
Yeah, so this is, I think, working for a large corporation, I have an interesting vantage point on this. I'm in meeting after meeting, right? And all of us have laptops. All of us have laptops. All of us have pen-based devices. I walk around with a really nice machine. I'm not gonna lie, okay? And I can't tell you how often when people have their laptop lid open in a meeting, they're not focused and they're not paying attention. And I can't tell you how much difficulty there is with trying to take notes on these devices. And so I have an interesting perspective because I have experience with watching people be distracted by technology, and it's fair to assume that when we're in our classrooms that phenomenon exists. And so if you actually, I spend a lot of time writing about this on my platform page. I kind of have this motto, which is teachers teach, technology engages, and homework reinforces. Because I think homework needs to be a part of all of this conversation too. The source of learning in our schools has to be our teachers, and our kids have to be focused on them. And so from a technology standpoint, I would love to see us close the lids when our teachers are teaching. Obviously, there are classes, if you're in a coding class, things like that, of course, the lid should be open. But when you're in social studies and you're learning about the War of 1812 for the very first time, that needs to come from our teachers. And one of the key things, that really matters for kids is social learning. And in social learning, it's all through the observation of others. There are a ton of science and evidence on this, that when your laptop lid is open, all aspects of social learning go away. And so our kids are not able to role model good behavior, which in a social learning environment in the classroom is our teachers. And so for me, I'd really like to see us start to think about these sciences and all of this research that shows there is evidence that we should close our lids sometimes. There's also evidence around note-taking, right? Where
we've had many conversations about that on the site too.
And there are different times and places. Taking notes, again, in social studies, I firmly think, this is my own child entering 6th grade, I want him using pen and paper because that tactile response drives resonance. And again, the studies show it. Math, on the other hand, I think math has a place to use OneNote because it's a different style of thinking. It's a structured thinking approach. And so it's more, you're looking through the structure of how you answer a problem, and so that tactile response might not be as necessary. That need for that resonance might not be as necessary because you're using a different side of the brain. So I think, and then technology...
You're saying it's somewhat subject dependent.
It's subject dependent and it's time dependent, meaning if you're in social studies and the teacher introduces the concept of the War of 1812, I don't know why I choose that word. There's just something about that one that's always resonated with me. But technology has the opportunity to bring that thing to life,
right,
with picture and with video and story in a way that the teacher might not necessarily be able to, or the textbook might not be able to. And so it's bringing both pieces together. It's thinking about our learning in sorts of, this is what's going to provide this side of the learning, and this is what's going to help really engage, and really taking the time on honestly, yes, a class by class basis, a subject by subject basis, and having an honest dialogue about it. From a board perspective, those dialogues are going to need to take place with the administration, right? That's Dr. Block and his team's responsibility. The board's responsibility is there's all this evidence out there, is to challenge, is to ask the right questions, is to push some of these, not push them down their throats ideas, but to make sure that they're thinking along these lines. And if they come back and they show the evidence that this is how this needs to work, then we can move forward. But that's what the board should be doing. And so that's how I see technology in our classrooms. Does that answer the question?
Absolutely.
Okay,
absolutely. Thank you. While we're talking about curriculum, well, just talking generally, if you're elected, what would be your top 3 priorities upon election? And is there one particular project? I mean, you mentioned big data that you would absolutely champion from stem to start, and kind of what you'd like to accomplish, let's say, in a first term.
Sure. So, I lay out 5 priorities on mine for the next 3 years. First and foremost for me is engagement. When I walk around this town and I've talked to folks, one of the things that's concerned me is where I see opportunity is I have a lot of people tell me they feel like the success of our district doesn't apply to them. I think if you look at your survey, there was this notion of lift the middle, and I think that's where it comes from. This notion of we're focused a lot on the top, and then there are those that need extra help, and we give them the resources. But there's this middle, and so for me, it's how do we create a greater reach out? How do we create greater engagement from a board perspective? Because that sets the tone for everything else. Because that's culture, and if you build the right culture, then all of your other initiatives they fall a lot more easily. And so for me, creating that engagement, one, amongst board members, I've had really nice dialogues with multiple members of the board, and I've been clear with all of them that I'm here to be part of the team, and how I'm going to disagree with you on things because that's what we should all expect of one another. But we're going to find ways of working together and coming together because that's the culture we need to role model. And when we do that, then we can start to figure out how we can better engage more folks, whether it be to get more people to come to board meetings, because I think it's important, or even to watch them online. It's important because these are our kids and they are important. And it's our community. I mean, Livingston, it defines itself by its school district. And so we need to find ways of engagement. So that is number one for me.
So let me just pause there. We'll get back to 2 and 3. But so just on engagement, you've been to board meetings. I've been to board meetings. How would you make it more engaging or accessible to community members?
It's an interesting challenge, right? They have to be held on certain dates and certain times, and so I think there's the board meeting, and then there's other ways of engaging.
Sure.
Right? You guys are social media guys, obviously. I'm a social media guy. I think there's a place for our board to interact online and to create a forum online. I firmly believe that. One of the things I'd love to see, honestly, and this doesn't have to even create engagement. We publish the notes. I would love to see our board members have a Facebook page or some forum where, hey, at tonight's board meeting we discussed this, and this is why I voted this way. Right, more than the formal notes, right? Creating a dialogue to say, hey, this is why, right? Because what the notes show is this was the vote.
Now, would you be advocating, let's say, beforehand as well? It's like, here's what we're discussing at tonight's meeting.
Absolutely. I mean, the last agenda came out, I think, the morning of the meeting. We have to be better at that. We have to be. There's no reason we can't be. And then there are always things that come up, and there always and I respect that.
Sure.
And there last minute changes. But when we have a presentation, and last week's meeting was a workshop meeting, right? Even if just the workshop portion were publicized, like the workshop was about board goals. Well, that should be something we all engage with. Right? It's interesting to hear how the board's goals are what the board feels it can control and it can act upon. Well, these are the people we elect.
Right.
Shouldn't those board's goals be based on our voice, right? And if your voice isn't there, it's hard to argue with them. And so, even if we just published that workshop portion, or we just published from the 2 board meetings ago, hey, we're going to have a presentation on Crayola and the kids who are doing the robotics partnership with Israel, right? There's a great opportunity, right? To just, even if we're not publicizing, they're going to be voting on these aspects of the budget or this and that, because those things might be fluid within a budget. There are aspects that we know are coming up, and we should be able to publish those. And so I am fully on board with that, but I am very much on board with creating an engagement post-board meeting. This is why we voted this way. This is what we talked about. This is why I asked this question. I mean, I think there's a lot to be learned by just saying, hey, the reason I challenged, whether it be a presenter or another board member, whatever it may be, or Dr. Block, this is why. This is what I was thinking about. That's the type of engagement I want to create because, one, I think we're better for it. I think we're more transparent. Again, and that was on your survey of last year. Transparency was a key metric on there. See, I paid attention to your survey.
Got it here
right?
someplace.
He does his research. But there's opportunity. They're not hard, right? I'm not saying we need to create more board meetings or more formal exchanges. I'm looking for opportunities that I think are solvable. Right, and that's kind of my personality. Is like let's if we chip this one off, let's chip off the next one, and then because maybe 100% of the idea isn't achievable, but if we achieve 80% of it, it's still a really good idea, right? And that's kind of what I'm trying to do around engagement.
That's good.
And then obviously one of the other thing for me on engagement is the actual measurement of engagement in our schools. Our school rankings are based on academic performance, which is perfectly acceptable and should never change. But there is a whole other side of the human being, which is, and creating a more holistic view of our students, our teachers, and our schools, which is to look at engagement, right? How much belonging do kids feel to our schools? What passion do they have for their classroom? These are different ways of looking at students beyond A's and B's. Because when you look at a student that way, maybe a kid's a B student and they'll always be a B student, but man, this kid loves being here. Well, are we not successful? Right? To me, that is an enormous measure of success. Even if we never get that kid off of the B line, I'm okay with that because this kid loves being here. Versus maybe we have a kid who's a B student who doesn't feel a part of things. Well, you know what? Maybe if we could help that kid or that group of kids feel part of this, we can get them off that B line beyond just looking at traditional academics. And so that's why I want to create a more holistic view of our schools and challenge our district to measure our students and on our classrooms in an engagement forum as well.
Interesting. So you were saying in terms of accomplish what you want to accomplish. So we talked about engagement.
Wow.
So.
Yeah. I've accomplished a lot in the last
But just to say, just to pause for a second, want to welcome everyone who's online. We do have a number of folks online as I try and pull that up right now. Just having some difficulties pulling up who's actually watching right now. But we have about 9 or 10 people online. Thank you for watching. We're here with Seth Cohen, one of the candidates for Board of Education this year, talking about what he's interested in doing should he be elected this November to the Board of Education. So we talked about engagement as one of your perhaps your top priorities.
Yep.
What else would you be focused on?
So I think we should all be focused on our students' mental health. I think of all the areas in my platform, this one might be the one where I maybe go too far into the administrative side, and I'm okay with that. I think I've communicated. I know full well the board is from an oversight perspective and the administration runs the schools. I just have this central belief that our students' mental health is not just the parents' responsibility or the school's responsibility or their friends' responsibility. To me, it's an all of us responsibility. And you'll see, I talk about taking an oath around a pledge towards our students' mental health, and it's symbolic, and I fully recognize the symbolism of it. But in creation of culture, symbolism doesn't matter, and being able to stand out there and say, we're here for you, we understand, you can come to us with anything and we're going to support you, is the type of environment that I want to create. And so you see in my first two, right, the engagement and mental health, they're really about creating the right environment in Livingston for all of us. And then the last one, I mean, you can't talk about much without talking about budget. I think I already mentioned we have a 2% cap. We have contracts expiring in June of this upcoming year. We're in a negotiations year. Technology costs are going to rise. We have to think about how we maximize the value of our taxpayer dollars. And so one of the questions you just asked me was, is there a new idea that you want to champion? And for me, it's academic return on investment. I spend my day at work, a big portion of it is measuring return on investment of our programs. And it's not about, are our programs making money? That's not the goal of an academic return on investment measure. What its job is are we getting the maximum value for our dollars? Because there is going to come a point where we're going to need to make choices. These budget, with contract negotiations, they're going to create more cost pressures on our budget. Technology is going to create more cost pressures on our budget. And so what can we do that's different? One of the things that we can do that's different is evaluate differently. Because what that would allow us to do is, if we have an underperforming program that might not be meeting the needs, right, we can do two things. We can look to improve it, which would be a perfectly good solution, or we could make the difficult choice to potentially cut something to replace it with something else that might drive a higher degree of whether it be academic performance or engagement of our kids, right? And so this is a concept I want to introduce into this dialogue, and I think this is this notion of maximizing our dollars. I think you're going to see from multiple candidates in this, and in fact, a couple of the other candidates have their platform out there, and they're looking at our maximizing our budget from how we can bring resources in from non-taxpayer sources and find ways of funding programs, which is honestly a really interesting idea and one I would love to debate. I'm looking at it from an angle of how can we take our existing resources and maximize them. It's why I also talk about further and deepening our partnership with the town council to look for more shared services opportunities, because the more we stretch our tax dollars, the better we can invest them. And so this is why this are great. When I kicked off my campaign in my Tribune, I talked about, I think there's a great opportunity, because you have other candidates talking about maximizing our budget. I'm talking about it, but we're talking about it from very different lenses. And with the opportunity to vote for two people on this board, we have the opportunity to bring two different perspectives to this, right? They're both valid, right? And, and I've been clear from day one on this campaign. I have a great deal of respect for everybody who's running. My hope is everybody does. It takes an immense amount of courage to do this, and I have great respect for Sam, Sasha, and Elise. And so, there's different opportunities to bring two different mindsets on the same exact topic and to debate them rigorously, and both of them might find solution within how we budget. And that's why there's such a, I view that as important, but two, just overarchingly looking at the election, I think it's so important that we look at where we have similarities, whether they be topic based like the budget, and look at how we can represent different viewpoints on our board, because there is enough evidence to suggest the power of diversity and diverse thinking. And great executives will tell you, surround yourself with people who disagree with you, and that's why I married my wife, because a great executive likes to surround himself with someone who disagrees with him. Shout out to her, and also to all the other spouses who were part of this. It takes an immense amount of courage on their part too to allow us to put our names out there. And so, my wife, I love you.
Likewise, and to mine, thank you for letting us have this here tonight.
Right. And so that's, so yes, opportunity on an idea perspective, but also opportunity within the ideas from a diverse candidate perspective. I think this is a great election for our town. I really do.
So two topics. I want to talk about this academic return on investment. It sounds like an interesting concept. Is it something that's been piloted or used elsewhere?
It has been. It's actually been around for quite a while. In my platform, I tag a post, a paper, I should say. It was written years ago on this notion. Excuse me. Sorry, I'm just going to take a drink. The concept has been around for a while. The challenge with it is it requires you to rethink how you budget. It requires you, rather than to look at salary on a bucket basis, right? So these are all of our salaries. It forces you to assign salary to a program, right? It forces, so you're looking, so you would say, let's just pick, any class, right? Just social studies, right? Middle school, 6th grade social studies. You would assign all of the costs to that and create a cost for that to measure the impact of that. And so it requires a lot of work, and I am not immune to the fact that it does that. But I'm also not afraid of a tough challenge, because when a challenge is worth taking on, you take it on. And so it requires us to think differently. It requires us to look differently. But the notion of academic ROI has been around for quite some time. It's difficult to implement.
Okay. Now, you mentioned diversity of thought. As you joined the board, Livingston is a diverse community.
Yep.
In population, in ethnic group, racial, demographic, all across the board. The schools, similarly, we have gifted and talented, we have ESL, we have special needs. How will you address and be able to bring together or work with all the various groups and be able to bring the diverse not only the diverse thinking, but also coalesce the different groups?
Sure. I think this is where my profession prepares me well. So in the last few years, I have worked on I've worked for drugs that are mostly affect diseases for senior citizens. So I've had to represent the voice of someone who I'm demographically not aligned to. I've worked in women's health over the past few years, where these category 100% for women, and I'm not a woman. And so, but I have to represent that voice, and I use those analogies because it's really important that somebody on the board be able to listen deeply and remove their bias, right? And that's what my profession trains me to do. And so whether it be our gifted and talented or our ESL parents and students, to be able to listen to them and to eliminate my bias and represent their voice is what I'm trained to do. And so I think I'm, this obviously is biased, but of all the candidates, I think I might be more prepared than anyone for that part of the job, because that is so much of what I do on a day in, day out basis, is represent someone else's voice.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a fair answer?
That is a fair answer. In terms of how it goes, I'm just okay. In terms of curriculum, so we talked about that a little bit in terms of how you want to. I'll call it, have like a little bit of an innovation pool, if you will, or an innovation concept. But what about current? I mean, for example, right now, our current students are not learning script in school. I was just wondering what your thoughts, and that's getting very specific.
Yeah,
but
no,
partially.
I saw somebody posted that on Livingston Education.
Yeah, it was on Livingston
this
Ed
morning
today. Yeah,
or yesterday, or last night. So this is one of these unique challenges, because as the world has evolved, we've taken the pens out of our hands and started to move into other forums. And
right.
I'm the type, and you guys might notice I don't post a lot on Livingston Education, or comment a lot, because I love talking to people and getting to know people, and I think there are lost arts of how we engage with one another. And yes, I do think it's important that we continue to teach kids how to engage with one another, and part of it is how to use the written word, whether it be through script or through just true penmanship. I think we shouldn't lose sight of, just because the technology is here, and I don't write a lot at work, right? If we think about getting our kids eventually to evolve and to professional, but I do it. All right, I do have to do it.
As do I. Yeah.
And so we shouldn't stop teaching something simply because the world is pacing in necessarily another way. And so on that specific thing, yeah, I'm not, am I in favor of it becoming a predominant part of our courses? No, I'm not. But do I think it's important that we not lose sight of how we communicate? Because there is, without a doubt, a loss of that in our society. We can do better. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's very fair. So you mentioned before emotional intelligence, mental health is important part of your platform. There are some issues this week, and that's been a societal concern generally about the generation that's in school now in terms of the stress levels. There's also concerns about this week nationally, as well as on LivEd too. There have been a lot of articles regarding vaping.
Yep.
Where
I had a long conversation with my 11-year-old.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we've had ours with our kids too. And where do you think the board's role plays? It's like where do the societal it's a balance. So where do you put the judgment in terms of societal issues coming in, and where should or shouldn't the board get involved?
This is tough because this is where this line of demarcation between our running our schools and overseeing our schools starts to blur a little bit, right? It's why when I talked about mental health, when I introduced my platform, I fully admit my platform might blur, because it's really hard. I firmly believe it's an all of us thing. And it's an all of us thing on this one too, on vaping and any form of drug, alcohol, smoking, whatever it may be. And so from a board perspective, first and foremost is obviously policy, right? And so our policy needs to be both humanitarian, that's not the right word I'm looking for, but it needs to take the person into account, right? The challenge with all policy is it's often rigid. Right.
I checked the policy, and I'm sure someone on LivEd will check me on this. But I believe
Me too, probably.
all, not only smoking tobacco, but smoking, I believe it said any device of such sort that delivers nicotine is prohibited on school grounds.
Yes.
And someone will check me on
that's
that.
correct. I read it not too long
So,
ago.
so
but
that's the policy seems clear. It's
It's
part of it is
implementation of
implementation,
policy, right?
But it's also then okay. Policy is one. Are you saying policy is one thing? But then we've got to tackle a larger issue.
Yeah. So to me, this is a community issue. I think there are opportunities that and for us, what I don't think we should do is naturally drive right to solution. I think when there was a post around this, like we should just ban them. What we need to do is take a step back and really start to ask some really good questions. And I actually saw this. It was all the way towards the bottom of your survey, which was this notion about teaching kids, understanding why kids make the choices they make. I think it might even be last on the list.
Yep.
That should rise, because the first thing we should do is once again take a step back and understand our teenagers, who are the most likely to do this, as well as our older middle school students, and take that time to first understand why they do this. Why are teenagers still have these feelings of invincibility? That's just a natural. We know teenagers are very prone to wanting to feel and look attractive and look cool. That's a natural thing that we all experienced it at some point in our lives. Because the thing that we as parents, and I'll speak as a parent more than as a Board of Ed candidate right now, we have this natural tendency to say, hey, we were teenagers once too, and I understand what you're going through. Being a teenager today is nothing like it was being a teenager when I was a teenager in the 80s and 90s.
They weren't as connected. They didn't have the iPhones, the iPads.
And so we need to first stop our natural wanting to solve the problem and first start listening to figure out how we can better understand it.
Sure.
And that's, for me, where it starts. Once we do that, then I think we all play a role. The board has to have policy in place, which it does, but we also have to be willing to put people, ahead of policy and find the right, if a kid is caught vaping on school grounds, it needs to start with education. It needs to start with love first and harshness second, right? And it doesn't, and I say harshness in the sense of whether it be any form of punishment, like suspension or anything like that. It needs to start with the kid first, and I think that's a mentality that we need to develop, and I think that's where listening and learning comes from. But truth be told, this is going to, all of us play a role. The policy of the board can only do so much. The effectiveness of the administration can do its part. Our teenagers need to do their part too, because I have met many parents in this town, and I think we're all pretty good at teaching right from wrong. And I think our kids inherently know the right choice to make. And we have to, continue to teach them it's okay, even if it feels pressured to make the right choice. And our parents have to play a role in this too. This is an all of us challenge.
Right.
And so the board on this one, honestly, there's not a lot the board's going to be able to do other than to continue to be the voice of making sure our policy is implemented with a humanitarian type approach.
Right. So you mentioned you don't post a lot.
Right.
So I did find one particular post. So I'll share that with you. It's here. It's on the site. Everyone can go take a look at it. So there was a graphic saying, "Never judge a child based on another teacher's opinion. They deserve to be given a chance. They deserve a clean slate. It only takes a single adult to turn a child around." You had written in response to that. Thank you for posting this, and it was posted by Kimberly Fitzgerald DeMeo. Thank you, Kimberly. And then you said, "Thanks for posting this. I can say with full honesty that I am that child. I owe my passion for where I ended up in life to a teacher who saw something in me." So I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on that.
Thankfully, I posted in the right way. So it's true. School for me, I am the son of a teacher. My dad it was long teacher, administrator, principal in schools. I have academics in my blood. School had ups and downs struggles for me, and there were teachers who didn't see the best in me, even if I was trying as hard as I could. I took a business class.
Probably wasn't easy being the son of a teacher.
I mean, it wasn't, because he was a science teacher. And it's ironic that I'm kind of in the sciences now, because it just was never my strength. It just wasn't. And that's okay, right? Every kid's different. And this one particular teacher, and it was a biology class, could not understand why I could not understand. I'm the son of a biology teacher, and I'm just like, it's just not how I think. I'm not how I'm wired. But in response to that, I took a business class, and this business teacher saw something in me, and she encouraged me, and and that's how I got involved. I remember in high school being president of FBLA, Future Business Leaders of America, president of DECA, I believe Distributive Educational Clubs of America, if I believe correct. Mm-hmm. She took me, living on Long Island, she took me to the Long Island Businessman's Luncheon. I got to interact with all these business people, which you'll see in my platform is something that I think we should do for our kids. I don't know. I'm not a high school parent. I'm still learning the high school environment.
I actually was at FBL. I presented to FBLA last year. So they have that here at LHS. So I think they're starting to try and get more parents involved in clubs like that.
But this was where the Long Island Businessman's Luncheon was like, this was like legitimate of all of these independent business owners, and she got us seats at a table, and I got to meet this guy, and he's like, my wife's starting, and so long story short, she helped find the thing in me and that passion. That's how I ended up, going to business school. I did major in computer information systems, but I also majored in marketing because I love marketing. When I went to graduate school, I majored in Master of couldn't shake the technology bug, right. So I have a Master of Science in IT. I also have an MBA in marketing. And so without her, I would not have. I don't know that I would have as quickly found where I wanted to be, and my absolute love of my home right now. I love what I do for a living. So, and I have no interest in changing it.
Great. Well, thank you. Anything else you'd like to add this evening?
So, first of all, I really appreciate the forum. I appreciate the opportunity. And my hope is, as listening to me, that there's something that resonates, that whether it's in my character or it's in my ideas, that it's worthy of continuing this dialogue. I am someone that I hope you'll want to get to know. I firmly believe that, when we elect different types of people with different types of backgrounds to a board like this, we can really create magical things together, because I am all about taking our ideas and debating them rigorously and finding the right culture of how we all work together. And so my hope is, if there's something that you didn't feel I answered well enough, or there's something that you want answered, you'll either post on this forum, or you're more than welcome to visit my page on Facebook or my website as well. And I hope to continue the dialogue. And so thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you. I appreciate it.
And thank you, Livingston Education group members. We appreciate it. If you have questions, as Seth said, feel free to put them into the comments section. And we look forward to talking with you in the future. Watch for more information. Thanks. Thank you very much, and have a good night.